Hi, I'm Lena Rao here at Crunch Week, where we talk about this week's most interesting stories. I'm joined by Colleen Taylor and Drew Olenoff, my esteemed colleagues. This week was a huge week for news. I mean, lots of news considering that it was the first week back in the new year. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
First off, Google settles this FTC antitrust probe. What do you think about that, Drew?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people were calling it a slap on the wrist. Google's not getting fined for anything. There's two main things here. So websites who have already been able to opt out, but they'll be able to get their search results, pulled out if they don't want to be in Google's, search engine. And then to be more flexible pulling out their ad campaigns from Google's service. I mean, a lot of this stuff, it was anti-competitive behavior people were saying about Google, and it's one of those things. I mean, I think Greg wrote a really great piece where he's like, is Google really a monopoly if the consumers just love to use it? And that's a good question. I mean, we don't have to dive deep into it, but a lot of people Google. I mean, that's their search engine. That's where they go. Does that make them a monopoly? I don't know.
And it's fast, and it's easy to use. Another sort of thing that was brought up was patents. And Colleen, do you have anything to kind of weigh in on that?
Not really. I mean, I think it's been interesting to see the larger industry's reaction to this. I mean, a lot of people were very happy. They thought, okay, this is good for the future of our companies, that the FTC isn't going to put Google out of business because that bodes well for my company. Right. People are saying that, but then, of course, Microsoft a little bit butthurt about the whole thing.
Of course.
So it's just kind of fun to see these big companies duke it out.
Right.
A bit. But,
so Google won't seek injunctions to block rivals from using key technologies patents. I mean, that was a part of the deal. So they don't get fined, they don't get anything. Move along.
Right.
Right, and especially related to some of, these essential patents, mobile technologies, that sort of thing. It definitely, it could really change the shape of the patent industry, which is affecting tech in a big way these days. So
yeah.
Well, let's move on to the next topic. Apple and Waze.
Yeah, this was a big story this week. It was kind of like a he said, she said situation. Waze is, of course, the Maps app, the geolocation app startup. And we had heard, some of our reporters, Mike Butcher actually over in Europe had it on very good authority that a deal was happening, that Apple was buying them. A couple of our reporters pitched in. That was like a slam dunk that this was about to happen. A day later, MG comes, opens up his WordPress and says, no, it's not happening.
Right.
So it's kind of on TechCrunch. So.
Well, and then the next web came in today and said it was going to happen, deal fell through. It's one of those things. So Waze is providing data to Apple and their Maps solution. So clearly they have a decent relationship, as MG said in his piece. They talk all the time. So maybe.
And with a number of other companies too, right? I mean, they're one thing that was kind of obviously revealed was that Waze is very desirable, but they're also thinking long term, and they've had a number of acquisition offers. But there's possibility of an IPO or
discussions are a negotiation tactic. Yeah, if they're gonna go public, of course they're gonna talk to everybody, and if the press gets wind of that.
Yeah, it's true. And they're talking about, you always have to consider the source when you hear about these things. If you're talking to someone at Apple, they're saying one thing. You talk to someone at Waze, they're saying another thing. A third party saying another thing. But yeah, the big thing here was the price. And how many times do we hear of, negotiations that fell through because, they couldn't agree on a price? I think what we're going to see a lot of in 2013 is these kinds of negotiations. I think we're going to see a lot more M&A this year than IPOs. And, these big guys are going to play some hardball, and the small guys have raised a lot of money and think they're worth a lot. And, these hagglings over price, I think it's only going to get more complicated.
Right. So Waze was valued around 250 million, I think, at its last funding, right?
Yeah.
And they decided that, or according to these rumors, that they weren't going to take the offer because the price wasn't high enough. That's correct, right?
Right. They wanted something. Our sources were saying they wanted something like 750 million, up to $1 billion.
I mean, if you're negotiating, you say, look, we're providing Apple with important information that's keeping its head above water. We're not worth 250. We're worth 70 million trillion dollars.
And everyone knows Apple has a lot of money.
Yeah.
So
shoot.
Yeah, shoot. But it'll be interesting to see what happens with Waze when this kind of stuff, when negotiation table stuff, gets public like this, it's interesting because there are many deals that happen that never get leaked until the deal announcement.
And the two of
That's
you have
right.
seen this before. Smoke, fire, smoke, fire.
Yeah.
It happens.
So there's a reason when information like this comes out to the press. Even though we're great at digging for this information, people can do deals and not talk to anybody. So.
And there's also been those sort of rumors around Foursquare too in Apple.
Yes.
So, definitely.
Foursquare Apple, Foursquare
Yeah.
Yahoo, Foursquare Foursquare. Yeah, I mean, and that might be one of those situations too this year that
Right.
they might have, if they do go for the acquisition route, they might have to take less than what they think they're worth.
Yeah.
Another key story this week was the whole Zipcar Avis.
More M&A. Big week for M&A
Yeah.
this week.
So Avis, the large rental car agency, bought Zipcar for $500 million, and it was a really interesting story because there was a lot of backlash about this.
It's one of these things, it's a success story, but then it's also a failure story. Because anytime, a $500 million acquisition, that's big, that's a lot. Zipcar had gone public and then it gets acquired by Avis. This is a big justification, validation of
Sure.
its model. But then at the same time, it's, a little sad to see it get taken out by the man.
Right. I mean, it is. You think about, how quickly, these things pop up. They get hot. Things like Lyft and things like that, and you don't want to see them go away. But sometimes they become a bigger part. The question will be: will Zipcar operate independently? Will that model operate independently, or will become the cheap version of Avis's services?
Well, the great thing about Zipcar is that Zipcar rents to people who are 18 to 25.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
Yes.
so if
Great
anything,
point.
this is kind of a way for them to kind of get into this more flexible
I
model.
think, yeah, you nailed it. Yeah.
It's also interesting because Zipcar, wasn't doing that great, as a public company. Are we going to see more of these companies that sort of rush towards an IPO start getting bought and sort of bringing it back to what you were saying? Maybe we'll see more M&A versus IPOs this year. It wasn't performing that great on the public markets. Its financials weren't incredible. So it was a good acquisition target, and maybe we'll see a lot more of these recently gone public companies become big acquisition targets in the future.
It's hard for people to wrap their brain around sometimes. I mean, something like Airbnb, once we see how this plays out, that's still something hard for people to wrap their brains around. Like, I put my house up for rent, and and my furniture's in there. It's amazing. It's an amazing company. It's an amazing model. But still, people aren't going to put their money there yet because they can't really understand it.
Another big M&A deal, Current Television, which is not quite a tech company, but it's, online media, a lot of techie sort of people involved. Al Gore, of course, sold to Al Jazeera this week.
Yeah, big news.
Al Gore to Al Jazeera. That's quite a transition.
Yeah, and this is interesting. Current is just right down the block from us, but I think, and I think all of us have probably personally known people who have worked at Current, but it seems like what we know of as Current is going to be no more. I mean, what they're selling is really the bandwidth and the real estate on these stations, but from what we've heard, it's going to be based out of New York, basically. So, adios, San Francisco Current.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, Current was having a tough time, but yet the acquisition price was reportedly around $500 million, which is pretty large. And, there's been some reports, New York Times had some great reporting about how, Al Gore really went to bat for Current and sort of the value in that. And I think that's pretty interesting considering we're seeing this wave of celebrities founding companies or investing in companies. So I wonder if this is just going to be a model that we'll see, and we'll,
I don't know how many vice
Al Gore is a
presidents we're
huge-
going to have.
that's true,
founding-
that's true.
But no, we've seen it too in some of Ashton Kutcher's deals where you see things and you're like, how did that happen? And you're like, okay. All right, well, Ashton clearly went to bat, put his name up
Right.
there, and, nobody wants to be embarrassed. I mean, I'm sure Current had a lot of great stuff, but all the shows, everything's going by the wayside. It's Al Jazeera US now. I just feel bad for the employees because they've had a tough go of it over the years. So.
Well, at least they don't have Glenn Beck, I guess, as a boss, right? He apparently also threw his hat in the ring, but wasn't really allowed to participate in negotiations.
Al Gore was not interested in selling to him. But yeah, it's interesting because it's definitely a positive notch in the belt in a way for Al Gore here in Silicon Valley
Sure.
for his entrepreneurial efforts. Of course, he's also a partner at Kleiner Perkins. And that hasn't been such a great partnership. I mean, he's gotten a lot of criticism for that because he has kind of spearheaded a lot of their green tech investments, which haven't, panned out so great so far. I mean, Fisker Automotive not doing so well. A lot of these solar companies and stuff haven't been the home runs that people thought they were going to be a few years ago.
Yeah. On the flip side, though, Current TV was pretty gutsy, right? I mean, you're like, we're going to make a station. We're going to do web content, take it straight to television through a channel. Hey, somebody had to do it. I mean, might as well be the guy who invented the internet.
I thought Current was cool. I mean, hey, I'm not going to lie. A few years ago, I sent my resume there a bunch of times.
Sure.
They never called me back.
I did too. Yeah, I did too.
I would have
We all
loved
did.
to.
How much did Mr. Vice President get out of the deal?
$100 million, they say.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Can't knock that hustle.
Exactly. Well, thanks so much for joining us for the first Crunch Week of the year. And please tune in next week.
Next week, I'm going to be in CES, actually. So we're going to do a Crunch Week from CES, from Vegas. So definitely check that out.